Welcome to the Express Boats State of Waterfowl podcast series, presented by Gros Savon Lodge. Join our host, Doug Miller, Executive Operations Manager at Gros Savon Lodge, wildlife biologist and passionate waterfowler, along with co-hosts, world champion duck caller Jim Ronquest, and Case in Short owner Bill Byers Hunter Club and Conservationist. State of Waterfowl is designed to provide you, our audience, with data, valuable insight, and information gathered from our guests that will allow us to scientifically determine the state of waterfowl, the health of our resource. We understand that the most valuable asset that we have is our resource. That is waterfowl. Without them, we do not have a season, commerce, purpose. Join us today as we dig deeper into what is the state of waterfowl.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of State of Waterfowl series brought to you by Express Boats. We got a full crew in the house again today. Jimbo, I see you got you holding down stud guard. And Kaysen, you're over in, are you in Memphis today or are you at the hunting camp?
I'm in Memphis, yep.
All right, well, good deal. Well, as always, we always have some interesting guests, and today is nothing short of that. In fact, it's going to be hard to give this guy an introduction after reading his resume. It's quite impressive of what all he's done throughout his career, and he's nothing short of a legend in the waterfowl world. And, you know, if you were to me, in my mind, if you were to look up in a dictionary what true waterfowling conservationist is, Mr. Jeff's picture would be there. And he's just done so much in the world of waterfowling. And when I think about old school hunters, and I use the word old school respectfully because this guy is just really the meaning of the tradition of waterfowling. So we got Mr. Jeff Churan with us from Chillicothe, Missouri. Mr. Jeff, welcome to State of Waterfowl series.
Well, thank you, Doug. I'm glad to be here.
Well, man, we want to sit down today and pick your brain and talk about your past hunting career. I know you've wrote several books about waterfowling. I know you're a decoy collector. You've been on multiple committees, and you know, I guess it's hard to pick a point of where to start at. But without going into great detail, do you even remember when you made your first hunt, and when did you get addicted to waterfowling?
Well, you know, I'm asked that question a lot. And do I remember my first duck hunt? When I started hunting in the mid-50s, we just went hunting. We went out in the country, and if we were walking a hedgerow, we were quail hunting. If we were in a briar patch, we were rabbit hunting. If we were in the woods, we were squirrel hunting. If we were walking up the back of a pond dam, we were duck hunting. And we didn't have Suburbans and pickups back in those days. We'd put the dogs and all the game in the trunk of a sedan. But it wasn't until late 50s that we began targeting ducks. And in Missouri, in, I believe it was 1957, they opened the second public waterfowl hunting area at Montrose, east of Kansas City. And I was there the day it opened. And that was the first day that I believe that my hunt was centered around waterfowl hunting. Unfortunately, we didn't kill a duck that day, but it was great. It was a great introduction to a great sport.
Well, as you mentioned, you being from Missouri, that area is really a special area. I know Jimbo gets to go up there quite a bit during the season, and I'm really looking forward, hopefully one day, to get up there to that Three Rivers area. Won't you tell us a little bit about the area that you frequently hunt?
Well, it's located in north central Missouri, and in fairly recent years, it's kind of gotten the name the Golden Triangle. And there are points of this triangle that are anchored by both state waterfowl management areas and a national wildlife refuge, Swan Lake National Wildlife Refuge. And in addition to those public places, through duck clubs, WRP, the amount of private land that is dedicated to waterfowl habitat, waterfowl hunting, has increased dramatically. Missouri's been, well, you were with the NRCS, so you know that Missouri has been a leader in issuing WRP permanent easements. So it's been kind of wonderful watching over the years the increase in the number of migrating waterfowl that stop in our area.
Jeff, talking about that, and you spent a lifetime up there chasing ducks and geese, and a lot of folks may or may not know that Swan Lake National Wildlife Refuge was once known as one of our goose hunting capitals of the world, Canada geese, the eastern prairie population. In your mind, has there always been a lot of ducks up there? And when did it kind of switch from goose hunting opportunities, Canada goose hunting opportunities, to mallards? Do you kind of remember that switch or how that went?
Well, sure. I've been a student of that, Jimbo. But yes, we always had ducks. But the emphasis, both at Fountain Grove State Waterfowl Management Area and at Swan Lake, the mandate was to provide habitat. And by habitat, that meant a lot of corn, dry field corn, for the eastern prairie population of Canada geese to feed upon. And as that situation changed, the management emphasis at those areas became more directed toward ducks, and that is moist soil marsh management. And that's done a lot to increase the numbers of ducks that we support in the area during the season.
I know you mentioned a lot of the private. Can you tell a lot of difference between duck use in that latitude between some of the river bottom riparian areas, your moist soil, and flooded corn? Do you see much difference in duck use between those varying habitats?
Well, I've never thought of it that way, but of course it depends on the ambient conditions at the time. Sometimes, the colder it gets, the more they want to be close to the river. The warmer it is, the more they'll stay farther away from the river. But the Golden Triangle is just a great blend of all those habitats.
Yeah, it's really a neat area. It's. I always try to figure out where people ask me where my favorite places to hunt are. That always ranks way up there towards the top for dang sure. It's neat country. As you think about the importance of those WMAs and Swan Lake and all the private work that's done up there with other folks, do you think that some of the duck use up there is it's kind of leading, but it's not meant to be? You hear a lot of people complain about North Missouri and people planting corn and flooded corn and they're stopping the migration. And, we've all heard these arguments. But some of that's due to good management. Do you not think some of it's due to weather, climate change, and mallard wintering distribution changing?
Jimbo, anytime there's a change, it's undoubtedly due to a combination of factors. And, we have so many things going on. I don't understand climate change as well as I should, but that's no doubt a factor. Different agricultural practices. I saw a map that showed the distribution of corn planting. And you'd be amazed at how much more corn is planted north of Missouri than in Missouri. With respect to flooded corn, made available by clubs and refuges. That really hasn't changed much. You know, I used to hunt up in northwest Missouri at a famous hunting ground around Squaw Creek National Wildlife Refuge back in the 60s. And those clubs up there flooded corn. This is no new deal. And it just seems to have come to light because of all these other factors that have created a smorgasbord of habitat for ducks in north central Missouri. And the folks out there, particularly the internet guys, got to find something to blame it on. And I think they picked on flooded corn, but I think that that's not the case at all. It's a huge combination of things. Does that make sense?
I'd agree. Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yes, sir.
How about you, Doug?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I was just trying to do the math in my head. I didn't have my calculator in front of me, but you started hunting in 1957, and that would put you at a 60-plus year career of waterfowling. How do you think in those 60 years, what has been the biggest changes in habitat that you've seen in your area? I guess, what are some of the things that really stand out in your mind in the last 60 years? How have we evolved?
I think the knowledge about and the emphasis on moist soil habitat types is probably the biggest change. And I think that, in fact, I think there were some scientists and biologists in Missouri. Lee Frederickson, if you are familiar with him, was a leader in discovering and proving the value and of the nutrition that's available in these moist soil seeds. And so if I had to pick out one major change, I think it would be the more emphasis placed on moist soil management.
I would have to agree with you here, Gros Savant. I'll take a fallow field any day over a Primos rice field. I know you put a roller in a field with a bunch of smart weed and natural millets, and that field's going to sustain ducks a lot longer than a new rice field will right now. So I'd have to agree with you.
Would definitely be more duck energy days. It's interesting to think about that. You know, I tell everybody about it. I watch it once or twice a year. It was a film put together, supported by the Missouri Department of Conservation and the Ole Matheson Company in 1963, titled simply "The Mallard." And a lot of the things they talk about then in 1963 are some of the same things we talk about now. And it's really a good watch for you video and photography nerds. Even then, if you watch the footage from it, it was very good for the time. And if they shot it exactly the same way today as they did then, it would look amazing. That being said, they talk about corn there. They talk about moist soil. They talk about ducks used in different parts of the country. And I think it's very enlightening. And I would suggest anybody that watches this, go to YouTube, look it up on Missouri Department of Conservation's YouTube page, and watch it. It's worth it.
That show was produced by my friend Charlie Schwartz. He's long gone, and he was a visionary. And I've seen that show. In fact, I think there was a guy featured on that show that was a world champion duck caller from down in southwest Missouri. Am I correct?
I think that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
Oh, God, I should know. The hunting scene in there is pretty good. And, you know, that was 1963 was the year, I think, wasn't that the 20-day duck season with one mallard limit? Was that 62 or 63?
That was 62. 62.
Okay, and that's when a lot of this was filmed. They shoot college. Got you. So the guy, they shoot a duck, and he's walking out, and the VO is just awesome there, and he's carrying one old greenhead. And I think the whole point to it, with whatever happens, if you're a duck hunter, we're going to continue to duck hunt regardless of what goes on with with limits and seasons. And it's good stuff. With that, talking about dogs and places, God, there's so many things to ask. What's been some of your favorite places to hunt besides home? That's a given.
Oh my goodness. I've been blessed to have shot at all over the country, and particularly through my connections in Ducks Unlimited. I'm a duck club nut. So I love to get to see the great private duck clubs. I mean, I've been to Greenbrier with you. I've been to Wingmeat. I've been to Claypool. In Canada, I've been to Long Point Company. In Utah, I've been to Bear River. In New Orleans, down somewhat in Doug Country, I had a delightful stay at the oldest hunting and fishing club in North America, the Tally Ho Club. Are you familiar with it, Doug?
I've heard of it, never been there.
Oh, it is. Well, it's just reeks of nostalgia. So as far as neat places, I put clubs up there pretty high, but I've also loved to hunt great waterfowling grounds like Chesapeake Bay and like Long Point Bay and the Mississippi River Delta. I've hunted a lot up in northern Canada. I used to fly up to Hudson Bay and hunt on the Hudson Bay coast. Another wonderful area is the Central Valley of California, the Sacramento and San Joaquin River valleys, the Delta, the Suisun Marsh. I couldn't narrow it down. I wrote one book. I wrote my duck hunting memoirs. And the next to the last chapter, I tried to pick out my top 10 duck hunts. And so how could you do that if you've been hunting for as long as I have? But I devised a system. I said, I'm going to pick out the top 2 hunts at my place. That was easy. I'm going to pick my top 2 hunts in the U.S. other than at my place. That was pretty easy. My top 2 hunts at my club in Canada. Then my top 2 hunts in Canada other than at my club. And then my top 2 hunts in Mexico. And that made 10. So it was kind of a neat chapter. So I couldn't remember what all those hunts are right now, but there were some good ones. So then the last chapter in that book, and I always tell people before I give them a copy that it is guaranteed to cure any insomnia you might have. It'll absolutely put you to sleep. That chapter is my bucket list. And I said that if you've stuck with me and you've read this far in this book, you probably think I know all the duck hunters and I've hunted everywhere there is to hunt. But there were still a ton of places I wanted to hunt. And so I picked out my top 10. And that could be a famous club I had never been to, a historic waterfowling area. It could be for a species that I'd never shot, or it could be to hunt a certain method, unusual method that I'd never shot. Well, no sooner had I written the chapter, I said, hell, I'm going for it. And I did, and that produced another book.
Very cool. And I know you're certainly proud of that. And I have had the opportunity of being at your camp with you and sitting one afternoon and listening to the full story. And it's really, really interesting of all the places you went to acquire that bucket list that you created. That's a really cool deal.
Well, and interestingly enough, Doug, after I completed that first bucket list, I embarked on a second one. I picked out 10 more, and I'm going to finish them this season.
That's awesome. What are the ones coming up this season, Mr. Jeff?
Excuse me, Jimbo, say that again.
Yes, sir. What are the what are the hunts coming up this season that will finish up that second bucket list?
There'll be 2. Lower Columbia River in Oregon and Upper Platte River in Nebraska.
Those are I've actually been to those 2. And those are good ones. Those are good ones.
So, Mr. Jeff, one of the things that we talk about on the State of Waterfowl series is that as equipment, shotguns, decoys, calls get better, it seems like the ducks only get smarter. The degree of difficulty, we never get ahead of the ducks. Have you kind of noticed that in your 64 years of waterfowling? Have you seen the ducks kind of keep up with the industry of waterfowl products?
Oh, I'm not a great user of motion decoys and some of the newer inventions. I know my boys and my grandsons, they like them. I'm kind of like Jimbo. I still like that jerk string, and I think we used that in the 50s. I would say that the thing I appreciate the most now is better equipment and clothing. You know, what we used to hunt in the 50s was a pair of Converse hip boots, non-insulated, blue jeans, hooded sweatshirt, army fatigue jacket, and a stocking cap. And today we have all this wonderful fabrics and good engineering, and we're just so much more comfortable. I would also say that when I started hunting, if you were a duck hunter, you had a duck blind. No one did walk-in hunting, and of course there were none of these wonderful products like the Momar stuff. You had a fixed duck blind, and that's where you hunted. And today, these hunters have become so good at devising how to get in small duck boats. And I think that has I don't think that's affected the ducks that much, but that's made us more effective hunters. Does that make sense? In other words, it's easier to get under the X. Isn't that what they say?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Jeff,
Casey,
I'd like to hear your. I'd like to hear your take a little bit on shotguns and shot shells over the evolution of your career, specifically the ban on lead, and now we've got some great, non-toxic stuff that's out there that's really kind of bridged that gap. But I'd like to hear your talk about that.
Well, Kason, first of all, I'm not a shotgun buff. Every shotgun I own is a shooter. My first shotgun I bought with my own money at Sears and Roebuck, a J.C. Higgins pump. I brought it home, showed it to my mom, and I said, "Are you mad?" And she said, "Well, no, I'm not mad," but she said, "I just hate to see you waste your money on something that's just going to sit in your closet the rest of your life." Well, that didn't work out. But I graduated from that to a Model 12, which I shot up until, probably the early 60s, and I switched to over and unders. I have never owned an automatic shotgun. And the reason for that is because I'm not very good at cleaning shotguns, and I figured that if I had an automatic, it'd be gummed up all the time. So when we had to go to steel shot, I switched over from the Browning Superposed to the Satori, which I still shoot. Shotgun shells, I used to buy a box of 25 shotgun shells, 2 3/4, ounce and a quarter, 3 1/4, number 5s and 6s at Sears for $2.25 a box. And of course they improved. We got to the plastic shells and so forth, but you asked about the change to lead shot. It so happened that while that was emerging, I was serving on the Missouri Conservation Commission, and we wanted to be a leader in the change to mandating steel shot. We believed the data, and we wanted to be a leader. And if you can remember, back even in the late 70s, we were trying to implement steel shot, and it was herky-jerky. 1 year it was for 12 gauge only, and only within 200 yards of water or something. And we just kept having these funny little rules. And so I was in Missouri, our commission, just a 4-man commission, and I was kind of a leader in encouraging my fellow commissioners to move forward with this and go totally steel shot in Missouri ahead of the national mandate. And we did. And my sons, which Clay and Jimbo know, they grew up in that transition stage. And I remember one time when Jimbo, we were at Crescent Lake, and that was back in the days when you about had an equal chance at mallards and Canada geese. Greg was sitting next to me, and he heard a goose, and he said, "Dad, I hear a goose. Give me a steel shot." Now, those boys of that vintage, they thought it was great, and it was. It was fast, and now the original product, they had just taken the guts of a lead shell and just put steel shot in it, and the wads and whatever else was in there didn't match up right, but they ended up getting it right, and I believe that steel shot and some of the other non-toxic shot are very good. My boys are hooked up with a brand, Boss, and I mean, they just think that stuff is absolutely wonderful. In fact, I'm going to go pick up 10 cases for Greg tomorrow.
We use a lot of Boss and are pretty big fans of it as well. It reminds me a lot of lead from my younger days. You mentioned kind of some of the crazy rules when steel was implemented. Did you guys have what they call hot counties? I know in our part of the world, certain
hot
counties.
Spots.
Yeah. So our farm spans a couple counties. So in certain blinds, we could still use lead. You go to another blind and you couldn't. And it was kind of like the Wild West there for a little while.
Well, exactly. It was ridiculous, and it was confusing to hunters, and I really couldn't blame them for being upset and not liking the deal. And I think Missouri was a leader in saying, all that hot spot stuff is gauge and so forth is ridiculous. We're going to go total steel shot for waterfowl hunting. And I think that was in 1986. And I think the national mandate countrywide came in like 88 or 89. Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty close.
Yeah. I've got a non-conservation related question, though. You mentioned superposed. I'm a superposed junkie. You also mentioned what you were paying for your shells. Do you remember what you bought the superposed for back in the day?
Exactly, I do, Casey. $365.
That's awesome.
I bought my next one for $550. And I don't know what I'd have to pay now. I have several of them, and you know, my grandson shot on a little trap team. I had a Broadway trap that I used to use hunting ducks. And so he brought it back to me during teal season and thanked me for using it. And I thought, you know, I could shoot these boss shells out of that superpost now, couldn't I? Hell, I might do that.
You sure could.
Now we're talking, yeah. When my wife and I first got married, she found an old cardboard box in the closet and asked me why in the world I was keeping this old box. It's the box that one of my 1964 Superposts came in, and that gun's never been shot. I explained to her quickly, like, whatever you do, don't throw that box away. Most of my guns are shooters, but there's a few I love to hang on to. But.
And, you know, Mr. Jeff, talking about buying those shells from Sears, he didn't mention the fact that I'm sure those were paper shells, too, that most people probably don't remember.
Absolutely they were, Doug.
That's something that you got to be a really veteran waterfowler to remember paper shells. I actually still have a box here that my dad had left over from his career, and it's kind of cool every now and then to dig them out. And I know if I have some friends over that are much younger than me, they're like, "What in the world is that?"
I wish I'd have saved some, but I don't think I have any. I could probably find an old hunting coat that had one of those old canvas hunting coats.
You know, for people that follow the State of Waterfowl series, they probably heard this before, but if you ever have the chance to go to Bill Byers' Hunt Club with Kaysen, he's probably got one of the best collections of old photographs that I've ever seen at a hunting club. They've done a really good job of documenting the past with the old black and white photos that he has on the wall in the camp. And listening to you talk about the old gear, I can almost visualize pulling you out of one of Kaysen's photos and those guys with their old khaki pants, and you know, it wasn't the Sitka gear. Talking about the change in clothing, it wasn't all about our Sitka duck oven jacket that we have on back in those days. It was just like you said. Even I hadn't even thought about Converse being a hip boot, but you know, I can remember the old Converse tennis shoes. But kind of cool to hear you say they made hip boots back in the day.
Oh, I got a little story I tell. My dad wasn't a hunter, but he'd bring his buddies up to the camp and they'd stay up all night playing gin rummy and drinking. And so I got them up to go hunting, and I finally went down, was going to get them all out to the blind. And one of the buddies was struggling getting his hip boots on. Well, hell, he was putting them on the wrong feet. So the next day I put a sign up down the mudroom. I said, toes point in, straps on the outside. So you remember those old straps on those Converse hip boots used to come off. So I want to come up and see Kaysen's place. Now, Kaysen, my Arkansas camp is at East Lake, but I belong to a club not far south of you, just west of Brinkley. Two Rivers Duck Club. I'm going there in the morning.
Sure.
So you can't be more than 30 miles north of there.
No, not even that.
No, Mr. Jeff, I can be to Kaysen's farm from my house in right at 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, probably the same for me. But I drive by there. I used to belong to a club up north of you called the Murray's Woods. You ever heard of Murray's Woods? Sure. Up by Colt. Yeah, I shot there for years.
So, I mean, from the way the crow flies at Murray's Woods, you're probably within 5 miles of us. It's pretty short.
Okay, that's what
different path you go to get there, but not that far apart.
And isn't Coca-Cola Club up there?
Yep. So Murray's Woods is northeast of us, and then Coca-Cola is northwest of us. About the same. Well, Coca-Cola's probably a little bit further away than Murray's Woods, but pretty similar. We are just outside of Hunter. We run from 49 down across 306, if you're familiar with those two highways.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
I'll come see you.
Converse. Yeah, come see us. We got a bunch of white fronts sticking around right now. Maybe kind of fun to watch for a little bit. They just started showing up here a couple weeks ago. The Converse thing got me. I wonder. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I wonder how many of our listeners even knew that Converse ever made anything like that. When I was big enough to finally go hunt in the woods, and I was pretty small at that point, I had to borrow my mother's Converse because that was the only thing that would fit me. They didn't make youth gear. There was no such thing when I was a kid. So the first pair I ever wore was Converse. So when you mentioned that earlier, man, it brought back a bunch of old memories, but long time ago.
Yeah, Mr. Jeff, my father he would have been 91 this year. He's deceased now, but he was a duck guide here in Southwest Louisiana in the late 50s and 60s. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but you may have in your hunting career. Today we run up and down with gator tails and big outboard motors, but they only used 3 horsepower Evinrudes back in the day. There was one called a duck twin engine that didn't even have a reverse on it. It actually, you spun it all the way around for reverse and had a gas tank built on it.
I got one.
I do too. I still have my dad's in the shed. It's an old tan colored Evinrude 3-horse duck twin.
Mine's a kind of a light blue color, but it spins around to go the other way. It's got the gas tank on the top.
Yeah, we talk about technology changing, and here we are running up and down the bayous with big engines. And back in those days, that's all they had to get to the blind and back. And somehow they pulled it off. If they didn't push, pull, or paddle, that's what they had. And it's just amazing how things have changed over the years.
It has that. I'm froze up on my
How
end.
much more change in the future? It drives me crazy trying to think, well, and I'd love to hunt 10 more years. I still have the fire in my belly, as you can probably tell. But what are the changes going to be for us duck hunters in the next 10 years?
That was going to be one of our questions. Where do you think we're going? Where is the future of waterfowl headed, do you think? Looking back 60 years now, if you had an opportunity to have a crystal ball ahead of you, where do you think we're going in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, Doug, there is a really nice article in the current issue of Ducks Unlimited magazine that analyzes the change in hunting over the years, and particularly since some surveys have been started since the mid-50s. And it particularly dwells on the decrease in the number of waterfowlers and tries to determine why that is. And it tracks hunter numbers with duck populations. And from the mid-50s, when the surveys started, to sometime in the 80s, if you plot a graph of duck numbers and hunter numbers, it's the same. Ups and downs. Beginning in the 80s, the direction was similar, but there was a divergence. There was less of a mimic. And beginning in the mid-90s, when waterfowl populations started increasing dramatically after that terrible stretch we had in the 80s, but yet hunter numbers continue to go down, and they may be at the lowest number, below 1 million today, yet we've had a historic run of good population. And then they also, in this article, compare that to the harvest. And even though we have fewer hunters, the harvest is staying up there pretty well. And so the conclusion is that no doubt we could classify hunters as casual and avid. And the conclusion was that we're losing the most casual in the casual group and the most avid in the avid group are doing more and more hunting. So while we only have 1 million hunters, we're still capable of killing 15 million ducks. So when we ask what's going to happen in the next 10 years, I kind of think that's going to be the trend. I think we avid hunters are going to keep at it harder and harder. And I think, as you know, and it's gotten expensive, right? You guys probably charge money for people to hunt at Drought, right?
Absolutely.
And Cation, how about you?
Yeah.
So I think the casual guys are dropping out. The avid guys are paying the price. Make sense?
Yes, sir. It certainly does.
Sure.
And I picked up on something earlier. You said when you said you made your first hunt that you were talking about that you actually didn't kill anything. And when you talk to a lot of people, they always say, "Oh, it's not like the good old days," and they refer to the good old days like we used to just fill pickup truck loads of ducks. But in reality, back in those days, the duck hunting may have not have been as good as it has been lately. So in your career, if you had to say when were the good old days, what time frame would you pick out and say was the best duck hunting era or decade?
Well, I think the good old days are now, and I think they began in the mid '90s. Now, if you guys promise not to tell anyone, I will tell you that I shot and retrieved my first duck in 1965. Now, that's 8 years from the time I started duck hunting until I shot and retrieved. I killed the couple I couldn't retrieve, and I did kill some geese, but my first duck took me 8 years. We had great hunting in the 70s. 60s was awful. Someone mentioned 62, 25-day season, 2 duck limit. A couple of years after that, 30-day season, 3 ducks, 1 mallard. That was tough. The 80s, 30-day seasons, we all went back to quail hunting. So I don't know. I give a few talks here and there, and title of one of my talks is "The Good Old Days Are Now."
Yeah, that's really interesting because I know a lot of people are just down on waterfowling and say, "Oh, it's not as good as it used to be." But when you really sit down and look at it, obviously there may be some changes in some localized areas due to habitat conditions and those things. But as a whole, the waterfowling world, we've only begun to peak, and I think, like you said, in the 90s and the 2000s, it's really been on fire. So it'd be interesting to see where we go. Are you staying up to date with all that's going on in Canada right now with the droughts? And I know you mentioned you had a club up in the Canada area. What's happening right now with the drought in Canada? Are you up to date on any of that?
Oh, I am. I just got back last week from central Manitoba. And one of my guests up there stayed and hunted Devil's Lake area before he came home. And North Dakota is unbelievably dry. The club to which I belong in central Manitoba is on a huge lake. It's on Lake Winnipegosis. And we target diving ducks on big water, canvasbacks, redheads, bluebills. That's why it's of interest to me. I don't want to go up to Canada and try try to improve on the mallard hunting that we have in Missouri and in southeast Arkansas. I want to do something different. But the lake was too low this year for us to get around in our boats. So we built shore blinds and hunted from shore. And because the ducks had poor habitat in the Dakotas, they overflew, and our lake, which is traditionally a diver lake, was loaded with puddle ducks. And I had some of the most fabulous teal shooting, pintail shooting, mallard shooting I've ever had. And in fact, the club's been open since September 24th, and I talked to one of our members who's up there, I think 2 days ago, and I think every shooter has shot the limit since September 24th. And believe it or not, they're still shooting lots of blue wings. And I mean, you said you'd lost some blue wings in Louisiana. They're probably down in Yucatan now. Those ducks are amazing. Be spread out over 3,000 miles.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing because I think most of our birds in the area have already moved out. So that was really interesting to hear you make that comment. So talking about killing limits of birds, you know, what is your definition of a successful hunt? Do you always have to come home with a limit of birds to say you had a great time?
You know, I was hoping we would get into this because there's so much more to duck hunting than killing ducks. And I mean, the people you meet, places you get to go, the camaraderie, the camp life, the dogs. It's just a huge combination of wonderful stuff. And, you know, my shoulders are shot. I can't shoot ducks like I used to. They got to be right in the meat hole for me anymore. I can't get an overhead shot, although I did make one the other day. I was really proud. But, you know, I'm happy today if I kill 1 or 2 ducks and everyone else has a good time. But, you know, duck hunting is just a marvelous combination. You know, for me to have the blessing of having sons who are as avid as I am and grandsons that are as avid as I am about the sport. I mean, my grandsons will get off work today and they'll be at the duck camp brushing blinds. What more could you ask for?
You know, kind of shifting gears a little bit, a lot of people put the blame on Ducks Unlimited for what some of the things that are changing in the world of waterfowling. You, of all people, are probably the most invested in the career with Ducks Unlimited. I've seen where you've held multiple positions over the years, and not just in the United States, even Mexico and Canada. You know, how has DU played a role in all the conservation, and what have they done that people don't really realize all the things that are going on? Talk about your career with Ducks Unlimited over the past 60 years.
Well, you know, there are multiple facets to Ducks Unlimited. The bulk of the volunteers are involved in fundraising, which is great, and we need that. Personally, I was more interested in the conservation side of it. I always felt like these people that were bidding on things at the DU auctions and so forth and sending in their donations just had blind faith, and that we did not communicate A, the need, and B, the results for and of our programs. So I served as Ducks Unlimited's head volunteer for conservation programs for 6 years. And I had several things in mind and that I got changed. And one, the thing I think I'm most proud of is that we needed a solid strategic master plan. What are the most important things that we can do with our money to be effective? And so we gathered the world's best scientists, some that worked for DU and some that didn't. And we had a 3-year planning process and came out with what is called the Continental Conservation Plan. And it's now a virtual plan that is constantly updated, and it's very good. And it ties into the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. In fact, many of DU's biologists served on those committees. So I think our plan is exemplary. 2 other areas that I emphasize that I'm proud of is that I wanted to be sure that DU's work was based on the best science. And we dedicated ourselves to spend between 3 and 5%, which is not unlike what goes on out in the corporate world for R&D, on waterfowl research. And we've been able to hire some of the finest biologists. I know you had Nikki Heitmeyer on one of your podcasts. Nikki and I go way back. We're great friends. Mickey was very involved in developing that plan. So, and finally, the other objective I had was for Ducks Unlimited to provide its expertise in the area of developing public policy. You know, we can raise $1 million and we can get matching funds and we can go spend $3 million on a project in the White River National Wildlife Refuge, and it will undoubtedly do a lot of good. But if we can get a certain facet implemented in a farm bill, such as improvements in CRP, you know about WRP, and so if we can provide our expertise to our congressmen and to their committees and to their staffers, man, we can hit home runs that are unbelievable. In fact, we were instrumental in getting the North American Wetland Conservation Act passed, which, you know, now puts out up to $50 million a year for wetland conservation. We're advocating for the Soil and Water Conservation Fund. A lot of that stuff is helping you guys down in southern Louisiana on your coastal marshes. So those are the things I'm most proud of: the planning, the research, and the public policy.
Yeah, that's really cool to listen to you say that and mention the part about the scientific data, that it's so key that we not go on just opinions and that we really study what's going on and use that data to the benefit of the waterfowl. And like you said, even down here in Louisiana, I actually sit on a committee with USA Rice and Ducks Unlimited that's trying to promote the rights industry down here, because that's such a key component of the Gulf Coast. Is we got to have a place for those birds to rest and then fuel up to head back to Canada. So I know Kaysen does a great job in the Arkansas area, but it is just DU has played such an important role in all of that.
So it's go ahead, Doug. Excuse me.
Well, I was going to say just a big thank you to you for all of your contributions, because over the years, looking at all the boards and the committees that you sat on, it, you guys were trailblazers through all these years creating all this that we've just kind of had handed to us. But you're the generation that put all the hard work in that brought all this to fruition. So thank you as a waterfowler for all that you've done.
Well, you're certainly welcome, but I'm pleased to tell you that DU has a very strong leadership group right now, and a world of wonderful volunteers and a lot of spirit, and they're going to continue to upgrade that plan and to follow it.
Well, and you mentioned policy. You know, that's something we talked about with having one of our upcoming guests, and he's been there before, is Ed Penney. He's the director of policy for DU's Southern Regional Office.
So not positive where Jimbo was going with that, but he was leading into Ed Penney and Southern Regional Office policymaker. So kind of, you mentioned how strong their leadership group is. Jimbo, are you back?
I don't think so.
We got you now, Jimbo, if you want to pick up where you were.
We can hear you, Jimbo. You want to finish your question?
No, I just had a statement. Mr. Jeff was talking about the importance of policy and mentioning Ed Penney. Ed's DU's director of policy out of the SRO Southern Regional Office. And we want to talk more about the importance of policy in Ducks Unlimited and how that affects habitat and duck population. I just had a comment there.
Well, it's super important, and the stroke of a pen on ag policy can just do wonders, and DU is earning their stripes. I mean, we have a great Washington office, and they break bread with the congressional staffers every day, and I think it's paying great dividends.
Agreed.
We're kind of starting to approach our time limit again. I know we could talk forever with Mr. Jeff. He's just such a wealth of information. Kaysen, is there any last comments you want or questions you wanted to ask Mr. Jeff?
Not anything that we've got time for. We may have to circle back and do this again. Definitely enjoyed our time today.
Yeah, I can definitely see a part 2 coming in on this. We didn't even touch on all the books that you've written, and just those subjects alone could be a whole episode talking about what went all into those books. So, Jim, any closing comments with Mr. Jeff?
Same thing you just said. There's stuff that I got notes written here that we never even touched on. So we got to do a number 2 at some point in time.
Yeah, well, while this being recorded here, I think we're October 14th today, and I know we've had a few specklebellies show up here in Southwest Louisiana and had a little push of ducks last week. Kaysen, I think I saw a post on Instagram where you had quite a few birds on your farm. What's happening in the Hunter, Arkansas area today?
We mentioned blue-winged teal a minute ago in Canada. We've still got a few blue-wings, surprisingly. I feel like that will probably go away here in the next few days. Our pintail numbers have bounced back up from teal season. White fronts went from maybe 100 on Monday to well north of 5,000 today, probably closer to 7,000 or 8,000 today. Definitely caught some white fronts traveling on that north wind. It'd be interesting to see what this cold front does over the weekend. I think it's about to get pretty exciting in our part of the world as far as birds coming in. So it's here, fellas.
Yeah, it was fun. Tuesday was a heck of a flight day, not to cut you off, Doug. And then this morning, just down the road from my house, is one of Arkansas Game and Fish W. Rice projects. And the middle levee on that field was black with specklebellies, looked like gabwalls, pintail, some blue wingers. I heard old hen holler out there, and of course a bunch of specks. So if you're a duck hunter, and being where we all get to live and spend our time is very exciting times to be at.
Yeah, and Mr. Jeff actually made me a little jealous. I didn't realize he'd already made a hunt. He done beat us to the punch up there in Canada. So he's got the jump on us already.
Yes, he does.
Well, guys, I guess let's wrap this thing up. And Mr. Jeff, it's certainly been a pleasure to visit with you. And I know we're going to have you back on here another day. And I really enjoyed my time with you a couple of years ago. And you have a very impressive decoy collection that I'd love to get to see again. So, again, thank you for all your service over the years through waterfowling. And we wish you good luck with continuing your bucket list. We hope you have great success with that. So, For all you guys out there that are listening to our podcast, don't forget to share this with your friends. The State of Waterfowl series is all about talking about waterfowl from a scientific view, and every now and then we get to have a legend or an avid waterfowler like Mr. Jeff to just talk about years past or a particular region, and that's exactly what we did today, and it was really cool to take a look back into waterfowling over the last 60 years. And so for all you guys that are watching us, we hope you stay tuned, and again, don't forget to share this with your friends. We'll see you all in the next episode.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Be sure to invite your friends to listen, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We all want to know, what is the state of waterfowl?